Hey everyone, it's Habiba here. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to join you. Thanks for joining my channel today. So as you can see, I'm on the road, but I want to share my thoughts about the Roe versus Wade, the repealing of the Roe versus Wade decision. So let's jump right to it, and I'm going to share my thoughts. So I don't want to get into whether, to people's personal views on abortion, whether it's moral, whether it's immoral. But what I do want to say is I think we can all agree, regardless of your views on abortion, that there are some very serious and unfortunate consequences that women, particularly black women, poor women, will face as a result of this decision. Okay, so for many women, you might? So for many women, abortion is a matter of life or death. Not all pregnancies can be carried to term. Even the doctors will be telling her she needs to abort it. It could be a genuine medical emergency. And of course, if she has a husband or if she has other young children, she has to take that into consideration. Of course, there are many women and young girls who are rape victims. They've been raped. They've experienced incest in their families. All these situations. There are many situations that warrant abortion, and that would actually make it cruel to force a woman, or a young girl in this case, sometimes she could be 11, she could be 12, to carry the pregnancy to term, right? And I'm just thinking in the example of like a very young girl, 11, 12 years old, her body isn't even ready for to carry a pregnancy to term and then to give birth. She has a small pelvis, all of this kind of thing. And then think of in a country like America, where the disparity is so huge, the gap between the rich and the poor is so huge. Not everyone has access to Medicare, to obstetric care. America is a country in which many people, they just don't have that access. So think if this is a very young girl, she doesn't have access, she's forced to give birth, there are childbirth complications rather, she could die, it's a prolonged labor, all of that. It actually makes me think of obstetric fistulas, the issue I work on, which you all know, how a labor in this situation, it could easily become obstructed and all of this, and then if it's a young girl. Anyway, the point isn't to get into that. Guys, it's Habiba here, and so I'm just continuing my thoughts on the Roe versus Wade decision, and just some quick thoughts and some quick points. So again, in all of this, we see how politics lands on the bodies of women in such a cruel way. What do I mean by that? Is that it's women at the end of the day who have to face the consequences of these policies, of these decisions that are so often made by people, and that in this case we see were made by people who have no direct connection to it, who are not going to face the consequences of it. These Supreme Court judges who ruled against it and who decided to repeal it, right? So politics very often lands on the bodies of women in such a cruel way, like in France with the hijab debate and forcing women to take off the hijab in public places. Again, an example of how politics lands on the bodies of women in such a cruel way. So yeah, our bodies are too often the objects of political debates, too often the objects of political decisions taken by people who are not affected by these laws and these policies. And what's very frightening about this? This Roe versus Wade decision, excuse the shaky camera if it's shaking, I'm on my phone, so okay. It was ruled in 1973 that women have the right to an abortion in the US under the federal constitution. This was 49 years ago, so let's just say 50 years. And it's being overturned 50 years later. This sets a frightening precedent. What else can be overturned? So our laws, are they really guaranteed when you think about it? And it makes me think of even, okay, I hope people don't think this is wild, but even certain slavery abolition laws and so forth, and so many things that became law, that outlawed certain things, that abolished other things, that legalized other things. So for example, sticking with our topic, abortion. It shows you how people can be made so vulnerable once again, right? if something that we thought was enshrined in law can now be repealed. Okay, so yes, very quickly, some of my final thoughts on this topic, because it's getting kind of late here. You know, in this issue, we need to remove politics and focus on development. If we were to focus on development, this honestly wouldn't be such a huge issue. And what do I mean by that? Focus on giving women access to proper social services, you know, single mothers and that kind of thing. Because many of the women or young girls who abort their children, it's a difficult decision for them. Many of them don't want to. However, they're faced with the reality of living, the economic realities of living as a single mother, raising a child, not being able to afford daycare, not being able to afford food and shelter. You know, many are living in dire poverty, are moving from shelter to shelter, living in their cars, you know, so all kinds of very unfortunate, precarious living conditions. You know, they're living in poverty. And no woman, no mother, no pregnant woman should have to make that decision, you know, the decision to abort or should have to consider, let me put it this way, should have to consider aborting, because if she were to bring the baby into the world, she wouldn't be able to provide food and clothing and shelter, or she'd have to give up the baby to foster care or to adoption. And then again, you know, the issue of the men, of absent men, of men who impregnate women, or men who, you know, and then they just flee, some of them. They abandon, you know, perhaps they hooked up at a party. Again, now I'm entering other issues. Perhaps they hooked up at a party. Sometime later, the girl is pregnant. She says, I'm pregnant. The man says, pregnancy, what is that? You know, so this issue of the woman having to bear the responsibility of bringing the child into the world alone when she didn't make the child alone. So there are so many unfortunate realities and unfortunate root causes that lead to this reality. Yes, so ultimately, this is something that shouldn't have been repealed. Like I said, it was put into law 50 years ago. 50 years ago, think about that. And today it's being repealed. Why? For what reason, really? Except as a way to control women's bodies and to make life difficult for poor women, you know, because poor women are disproportionately and will be disproportionately affected by this outcome. Poor women, Black women, we know. And already in the States, if you're in, if you know a thing or two about maternal health, reproductive health in the US and so forth, Black women are disproportionately affected by all these issues, right? And again, and it's directly linked to poverty, the socioeconomic status of Black women, right? Their social status, their economic status, and so forth. Another thing, regardless of your personal views on abortion, just take a step back, have compassion for a second. You know, we all have our personal views on abortion. I have my personal views on abortion, right? But socially, politically, we should all recognize how this affects women. Certain women, you know, like I said, certain women. And again, just to expand that line of thought, it affecting certain women, these judges who made the decisions. Okay, so some of them are men, as we know. But even say the female judges or female judges who make those kind of decisions in the States, they're not affected. Even if they're living in a state where it's illegal, they can easily fly to New York. They can fly to New York, or they can bring the doctors to them to have it done. So because of their status in society, again, this whole thing of class and of social status, they're judges, they're Supreme Court judges, they wouldn't be affected by it, even living in a state where it's been made illegal. So yeah, ultimately, compassion in all of this. Compassion. Most women don't just want to abort their children anyhow, like that. Think of what they're battling with inside themselves, and think of some of those issues I outlined earlier. And then again, not to mention those cases of rape, you know, rape, incest, so sexual assaults, very young girls, 11, 12 years old, who really shouldn't be carrying a pregnancy, and sometimes carrying a pregnancy
can kill them. You know, let's just keep it real, can kill them. So thank you all for listening to my thoughts on this topic. I'm going to make some more videos on this topic. I'm also going to make some other videos on reproductive justice, particularly as it pertains to Black women, and some of my thoughts as a Black woman when it comes to reproductive justice, and what that means, you know. And I think it's an opinion. The opinion I'm going to share is one that too often isn't considered when I see a lot of mainstream discussions around women's bodies and reproduction and childbearing. So I'm going to share an opinion that I don't really see, that I don't see in the mainstream, that isn't really considered or put out there. I have some thoughts that I need to put out there that I'm going to share. So stay tuned for some of my upcoming videos. I'm going to be more regular, more consistent with YouTube. There's a lot I want to say. So thanks for watching me, and I hope to see you in my next video. Share this with your friends, like it, subscribe to my channel. Don't go away. I'll be back at you very soon. Have a good night. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Available at stores near you. Get yours now so you don't miss out. Until next time.